We left Chiengdao Cave 3 days later and then split up for a night, one of us staying in Park Phieng Cave, the other in Jan Cave. These were very relaxing places to stay. No incidents. After that, we set out for Phang to stay at Tab Tao Cave, which at that time had no villages nearby. There we met an old monk, Grandfather Phra. Reaching the base of the hill, we found banana and papaya orchards and a clear flowing stream. There were 2 large open caves, and 1 long narrow one. In one of the open caves were rows and rows of ancient Buddha images, and another enormous Buddha image that Grandfather Phra was building himself. When we first went to his quarters, we didn't find him, so we then went east, following the stream up the mountain. We came across an old man wearing maroon shorts and a maroon short-sleeved shirt. He had a large knife in his hand, with which he was cutting back the forest. His movements were vigorous and strong, like those of a young man. We walked toward him and called out, "Do you know where Grandfather Phra is?" When he caught sight of us, he came quickly toward us, with the knife still in his hand, but when he sat down with us, his manner changed into that of a monk. "I'm Grandfather Phra," he said. So we paid him our respects. He led us back to his quarters, where he changed from his shorts and shirt into a dark set of robes with a sash tied around his chest and a string of rosary beads in his hand. He told us the stories behind each of the caves. "If you want to spend the Rains retreat here with me, you can, seeing as you're students of Ajahn Mun, but you can't take me as your Ajahn, because at the moment I'm growing bananas and papayas to sell in order to raise enough money to finish my Buddha image." Still, he ate only 1 meal a day. That evening, he showed us around the banana and papaya groves, which he had planted himself. "If you feel hungry," he said, pointing to the trees, "you have my permission to take and eat as much as you like. Ordinarily, I don't allow other monks to touch them." It hadn't occurred to me that I'd want any of his fruit, but I appreciated his kindness. Every morning before dawn, he'd send one of his disciples to where we were staying with bananas and papayas for us to eat. I noticed a lot of strange things about the area. The peacocks in the forest weren't at all afraid of Grandfather Phra. Every morning, doves would come to where he'd be eating, and he'd scatter rice for them to eat. Sometimes they'd allow him to touch them. Every evening, monkeys would descend in hordes to eat the papayas he had spread out for them. If any villagers happened by on their way to worship the Buddha images, though, the animals would all run away. To enter the long, narrow cave, we had to light a lantern and climb up and down a narrow, crooked passageway. After about 30 minutes, we came to a small chedi, deep in the cave. Who built it, or when, no one knows. After we had done what we felt was enough cave exploring, we set out across the jungle and stopped at Cock River Village. This was a good-sized village with a tall hill to the east. At night it was very cold. All you could hear were the roars of tigers passing back and forth along the side of the hill. The village had no temple, but it did have a sacred Buddha image, a little less than a meter across at the base, and very beautiful. Someone had brought it from the middle of the jungle. After 2 nights in Cock River Village, we said goodbye to the villagers and set out across a large tract of virgin forest. We walked for 3 days before coming across another village. As soon as the people in Cock River Village had learned that we were planning to go, they tried to dissuade us because there were no places in the forest where we could go for alms. So I said, "That's all right, it's only 2 days, I can take it. All I ask for is enough water to drink." The morning of the day we were to leave, just as we were returning from our alms round in the village, we met a man who informed us that he was going to leave for Chiengsan that day, and so would be able to accompany us through the forest. Before we left the village, an old man came to warn us. "On your way through the forest," he said, "you'll come to a spot where there are a lot of spirit shrines. If it isn't yet dark when you reach there, don't stop. Go on and spend the night somewhere else. For the forest spirits, they are really fierce. No one who spends the night in that area can get any sleep. Sometimes it's a bird, sometimes a tiger, sometimes a deer. Always something to keep you awake all night." So, the 3 of us, Phra Kien, the layman and myself, set out across the forest. And sure enough, along the way, we came across the spot the old man had mentioned. Phra Kien, who had heard the old man's warning, said to me, "Then Ajahn, let's not stop here." But I told him, "We've got to. Whatever's here, we'll find out tonight." So we stopped, and pitched camp by the spirit shrines. I had the layman tear down all the shrines and set them on fire. "I'm not afraid," I said. "I've never seen a spirit who was any match for a monk." But glancing over at Phra, I could see his face turn pale. Night fell. We built a fire and chanted the evening service. Then I said, "We all have to believe firmly in the virtues of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha." I made a vow to look for no more shelter that night than the shade of a tree, and found a piece of wood to use for my pillow. I was going to be tough with myself and not shrink from any hardship. I ordered that we sleep fairly far apart, but close enough to hear if one of the others called out, "Don't be too intent on getting any sleep tonight," I said. After that, each of us entered his umbrella tent, feeling really exhausted from the long day's journey. I sat for a while, doing some more chanting. The layman slept. Phra lay snoring and mumbling in his sleep for a while, and then fell quiet. I began feeling really tired, and so lay down too. After a moment, though, a sound like someone whispering came to me and said, "Get up. Something's going to happen." I got up with a start and, sure enough, heard a rustling noise about 10 meters from where Phra was sleeping. Lighting a candle, I called out to the others to get up. I then lit a fire, and we sat there, the three of us, in the middle of the vast, silent forest, saying our chants. A moment after we started chanting, there was a very peculiar-sounding bird call. The old man in the village had said, "If you hear this sort of bird call, don't lie down, otherwise a spirit will come and suck your blood dry." So we all went without sleep, sitting up until daybreak. In the early morning darkness, the layman fixed rice porridge for us, and after we finished eating, we went out for a look around. We found tiger tracks, marks of its digging, and a fresh pile of its dung. Nothing else happened that night. We waited until it was bright enough to see the lines on our palms, and then set out through the forest. We walked all day, until at nightfall we reached a small hill with a crystal-clear waterfall. The sound of falling water echoed throughout the area. We stopped here and rested for the night without any incidents. The next morning, after we had finished our rice porridge, we set out again. At about 1 p.m., we stopped for rest under the shade of a tree. This is where the layman said goodbye and hurried on ahead of us. We never saw him again. Phra and I walked on until it was almost dark, when we came to a village. We asked the people there if they had seen anyone walk past their village earlier that afternoon, but it seemed that no one had. The next day we left for Chiang Saen, where we spent a few days staying in an orchard before heading on to Chiang Rai. In Chiang Rai, we stayed at a small cemetery outside of town, and there met an old monk, Grandfather Min Han, who had been a follower of mine before his ordination. He introduced us to the chief of the Chiang Rai Provincial Police, so that the chief of police could help us on our way back to Lampang. The chief of police seemed happy to help. He got us on a bus that we took as far as Phayao, where we got off and travelled on foot past Pha Thai Cave. The trail was really overgrown, and then on into Lampang. We spent one night at a small temple just to the southwest of the Lampang railroad station, and the next morning set out on foot along the railroad tracks. We came to a cave at one point, a place named Tam Keng Luang, Grand Rapids Cave, where we spent 3 nights. It was a comfortable place to stay, very peaceful and quiet. We went for alms in a nearby village, but no one paid much attention to us. For 2 days, we had nothing to eat but rice, not even a grain of salt. The 3rd day, before going out for alms, I made a vow. Today, if I don't get anything to eat with my rice, I'm not going to eat at all. Sure enough, I got nothing but a ball of glutinous rice. When we got back to the cave, I sat thinking about the trip ahead of us and then said to Phra, "Today, I'm going to donate my rice to the fish. Even if somebody comes to donate heaps of food, I'm still not going to eat. How about you? Are you with me?" "I'm afraid I can't go along with you," he answered. "I've had nothing but rice for 2 days now, and I'm starting to feel weak." "In that case," I said, "I'm going on ahead. If you want to eat, you can stay here. Maybe someone will come with food for you." So I gathered my things and left. I told myself, today I'm not going to ask anyone for food, either by going for alms or by out and out asking. Only if someone invites me to have food will I be willing to eat. After walking for an hour, I passed a small village of 3 households. a woman came running out of one of the houses, raised her hands in respect, and invited me into her home to have some food. My husband shot a barking deer yesterday, and I'm afraid of the sin. So I'd like to make merit with a monk. You've just got to come to my house and have something to eat. I was feeling a little hungry from having had nothing but rice to eat for 2 days, plus not having had anything at all that morning. So I said to myself, okay, go ahead and have a little barking deer. I accepted the woman's invitation, left the railroad tracks, and sat down in a grove growing near her home. She invited me into the house, but I said, this is where I'm sitting, so this is where I'll eat. She brought out 2 trays of food, plus a basket of glutinous rice, and I ate my fill. When I finished, I chanted blessings for her, and then was on my way. After 2 days of walking along the railroad tracks, I reached the town of Uttaradit. Although I had quite a few followers in town, I didn't want to tell anyone I had come, so I went on past the town and stayed in a cemetery near Wat Tha Po. I then spent 2 nights at Wat Tha Sao, waiting for Phra to catch up with me. When he didn't show up, I decided that we had parted ways and that neither of us had to worry about the other anymore. From there, I went to stay in an old temple near Bandara, Star Village Junction, south of Uttaradit. One afternoon at 2 p.m., after just a few days there, I happened to be sitting in the sala, passing the time of day, when 2 people came in out of the sun to join me, a monk and a layman. We started talking about what we were doing and where we were going. The 2 of them, it turned out, had a buried treasure map and were on their way to dig for the treasure, which according to the map was in Phitsanulokhe. The layman said that his name was Lieutenant Colonel Sujai and that he was a retired army officer. As evening came on, they left. Where they went to stay, I have no idea. Early the next morning, before dawn, I heard someone calling me from outside my room. Now who could that be? I thought. So I got up and looked out. There was Colonel Sujai. What are you doing here? I asked him. I haven't been able to sleep all night, he said. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face, and I keep wondering how you're going to get all the way to Korat traveling alone. I can't help feeling sorry for you. So I'd like to give you 10 baht toward your train ticket. I told him I'd be pleased to accept his money and had one of the temple boys come and take it to put in safekeeping. Later, the following night, the thought occurred to me that Colonel Sujai might be playing a trick on me. I bet that bill is counterfeit, I thought. So I asked the temple boy to fetch the bill and take a good look at it to see whether or not it was fake. He assured me it wasn't. The next morning before dawn, Colonel Sujai came calling for me again. I'm worried about the money I gave you, he said. I'm afraid it won't be enough. Then he added, when are you leaving for Korat? Tomorrow, I answered. So he promised, I'll take you to the station and buy your ticket for you. Then he left. The next day he went and bought the ticket. It cost 11 baht and put me on the train. The train pulled into the Nakhon Sawan station in the middle of the night. I didn't know where I would stay until I spotted an empty sala. I went there and hung up my umbrella tent, put down my bowl, and sat down to rest for a while. A middle-aged man came along and asked if he could join me. If he's a thief, I thought. I'll be stripped of my bowl and belongings tonight because I'm dead tired. I'll probably sleep like a log. But what the heck, let him stay. As it turned out, nothing happened that night. In fact, early the next morning the man bought some food to donate to me. At 7, we boarded the train together, heading south. He was a native of Kabinbury in Prajinbury province and had been up to see his daughter in Phichit. When we reached Ban Phachi Junction, I changed trains for Nakhon Ratchasima, Korat, arriving there at 6 in the evening. I went to stay with Ajahn Singh, who had founded a monastery and been living there for 3 years. I asked for news of Ajahn Mun, but Ajahn Singh had no idea of his whereabouts. I decided to spend the rains retreat that year in Nakhon Ratchasima province. Just before the rain started, a layperson from Krathoag, now Chokchai district, came and asked Ajahn Singh for a monk to come and stay in his town. The layperson was Kunam Nadam Nwekit, the district official there in Krathoag. Ajahn Singh asked me to go, and I decided to accept the invitation. As it turned out, I stayed on, teaching the monks, novices, and laypeople in Krathoag for 2 years. At the end of my first rains retreat there, I got news from home that my father was very ill, so I made plans to return home to visit him. Before I left, Kun Amnad Amnuikit invited me to give a sermon at his home. This was the 8th day after the end of the rains, October 12th. At about 5 in the evening, before I left for Kun Amnad's house, there was a peculiar incident. A swarm of more than 100 squirrels came running into the monastery and gathered on the porch of the hut belonging to one of the monks, Phra. Nothing like this had ever happened since my arrival in Krathwag, so before leaving the monastery, I called all the monks and novices to my quarters for a meeting. There's going to be an incident tonight, so I want you all to be on your toes. After you've finished the evening chanting, A, you are to return to your quarters, sit quietly, and meditate. Don't sit around talking. Each person should keep to himself. B, if you have any personal business to take care of, like sewing robes, save it for another night. I then left for the district official's house. At 7 that evening, after I had been on the sermon seat for half an hour, preaching to the district official, civil servants, and other townspeople about the virtues of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and one's benefactors, 2 laymen from near the monastery came looking for me. But because I was sitting there preaching with my eyes closed, they didn't dare interrupt. After the sermon was over, they informed the district official that someone had tried to stab Phra, but he had received only a surface wound. On hearing this, the district official called his assistant and a number of policemen, and they went to see what was up at Bongchi Cemetery Monastery. I went along with them. The officials were able to trace the suspect, a man named Nai In, to a village where they found him hiding out in a friend's house. The district official had the police take both Nai In and his friend into custody. The police continued to investigate the matter for several days, while we at the monastery ran our own investigation. We learned that since my coming to spend the rains there at Bongchi Cemetery Monastery, the way I and the other monks in the monastery had conducted ourselves had received a great deal of praise from the district official, civil servants, townspeople, and most of the people in the nearby villages. Other temples in the area had become jealous as a result, and not wanting us to stay on there, had laid plans to frighten us away by doing us bodily harm. As for the police, they tried to interrogate Nayin, but didn't get anywhere because he wouldn't confess. So finally, the chief of police came and told me, whether or not he confesses, I'll still have to keep him behind bars for a while because he's in my custody. Tomorrow I'll take him to the provincial prison. Hearing this, I felt sorry for Nayin. To tell the truth, he was a scoundrel from way back, but I had had him run a number of errands for the monastery, such as helping us find firewood. So in a way, he was a follower of mine. I thus asked the chief of police to bring Nayin and his friend to see me later in the day. At about 3 in the afternoon, the chief of police brought the 2 of them to the monastery. I said to Nayin, if it's true that you're involved in this, I don't ever want you to do it again, no matter whether it's a case of a monk or a layperson. I want you to stop. If it's not true that you're guilty, then it means you're a good person. So today, I'm going to ask the chief of police to give me Nayin. From today onwards, I'll ask Nayin not to cause the monastery any trouble. May the chief of police please let Nayin go, so that there'll be no more animosity between us. That was the end of the matter. From that day on, Nayin became very close to the monastery. If we ever had any errands to be run or work to be done, we could always call on him. As for the people in Chokchai, who had once resented our presence, they now began to hold us in awe. The word got around. One of Ajahn Lee's students, Phra, was stabbed full force with a scythe, and yet the blade didn't even enter the skin, just gave him a foot-long scratch. If his student is that invulnerable, just think what he's like. Actually, the truth of the matter was nothing like that at all, and had nothing to do with Phra being charmed or invulnerable or anything. What happened was simply that Phra had taken a chair and a sewing machine that evening and placed them on the porch of his hut, which was about a meter off the ground. As he was sitting in the chair, sewing his robes, the attacker standing on the ground tried to stab him in the left shoulder with a long-handled scythe. The handle struck the chair though, so the scythe left only a surface wound. Afterwards, I called the monks and novices together and drew a number of lessons from the incident. I finished by saying, don't lose your nerve. If there are any more incidents, I want you all to stay here in peace. I'm going to go visit my father in Ubon. I then set out for Ubon. Reaching home, I found my father seriously ill, wasting away from old age. He was now 69. I stayed close to him, nursing and caring for him for several months, until the rains grew near, when I returned to spend a second rains retreat back at Bongchi Cemetery Monastery. I later received news that he passed away in the middle of the rains on September 8th. Toward the end of the rains retreat, I began thinking more and more often of Ajahn Mun. I decided without telling anyone that I would have to leave the monastery. That dry season I went to Wat Salawan in Nakhon Ratchasima to take my leave of Ajahn Singh, and he gave his permission for me to go, which pleased me immensely. I returned to Chokchai to say farewell to the monks, novices, and lay people there. One of my very good friends, a person who had given a lot of solid support in helping to build and look after the monastery, told me, "If you don't come back here for the next rains retreat, I'm going to put a curse on you, you know." That was Dr. Wad, the town doctor in Chokchai. So I told him, "What do you want, after all I've taught you about inconstancy?" So then, with a handful of followers, I went deep into the Ajahn wilderness, passing the branch district of Nang Rong and reaching Phnom Rung Mountain just inside the borders of Buriram province. We climbed the mountain and stayed for several days high on the summit. There on the summit were a number of ancient stone temples and large stone pools filled with water. The mountain was far from any habitation. One day I went without food, but my meditation went well. A few days later we climbed down and spent a night by a pool at the foot of the mountain. The next morning we went for alms, and then walked on for a number of days until we reached Talung district in Buriram. It so happened that Kun Amnad Amnuekit had just been transferred here to be the district official. We were both very happy to see each other. After staying for a few days, I took my leave of Kun Amnad so that I could go into Cambodia. On this trip, there were 5 of us altogether, 2 boys, 2 other monks, and myself. Kun Amnad arranged temporary passports for us. We went down into Cambodia, travelling first to Ampel, then passing through a large jungle to Svechek, and from there on foot to Sisophon. After our arrival at Sisophon, a number of laypeople came to discuss the Dhamma with me. They became very impressed and began to follow me in throngs. When the time came to leave, some of them, both men and women, began to cry. While I was at Svechek, there had been one person who held me in great esteem and who brought his daughter to talk with me every day. His daughter told me that she was unmarried. The tone of their voices told me that they wanted me to settle down there. They'd be willing to help me in every way, they said. Just please stay. As the days passed, we seemed to take more and more of a liking to each other. When I could see that things were beginning to get out of hand, I realized that I'd have to be going, so I said goodbye and headed south for Sisophon. From Sisophon we went on foot to Battambang, where we stayed in the cemetery at Wat Ta-ek, about a kilometre from town. In Battambang I met a layman who knew Kun Amnad Amnuekit. He gave me a hearty welcome and introduced me to a lot of people in town. After staying there a good while, we said goodbye and headed for the province of Siem Reap. We camped for a while at a cemetery in the forest, where a number of people came to donate food. From there we left for Angkor Wat, where we stayed and wandered about, looking at all the ancient ruins. We spent 2 nights there. The first day we had a meal. The second day we decided not to, because there was hardly anyone to place food in our bowls when we went out for alms. Leaving Angkor Wat, we headed for Phnom Penh. Along the way we climbed a huge, tall mountain, a nice, quiet, secluded place with plenty of drinking water. The mountain was called Phnom Kulen, Wild Lychee Mountain. At the summit were scores of wild lychee trees bearing bright red fruits. About 20 small villages surrounded the base of the mountain. We stayed there a few days in a Vietnamese temple that had a Buddha image carved into the rock of a large overhanging cliff. While there, I took advantage of the opportunity to explore the nearby caves. Near the temple was a village of about 10 households that we were able to depend on for alms. Staying in the temple were 2 people, a Cambodian monk, about 50 years old and with only one good eye, and a lay follower. Whenever I had nothing else to do, I'd sit and discuss Dhamma with the monk. As for the caves, there were 2 of them, one where I stayed with my following, and the other about 10 meters from the Buddha image, where a large tiger lived. At the time, though, because it was April, the tiger had gone down to live in the lowland forests. When the rains began, it would come back to stay in the cave. One afternoon, I left the cave and returned to stay at the Vietnamese temple. Altogether, we stayed there for about a week. We then left, going down the west side of the mountain. It took 10 hours of climbing to get through the mountains before reaching the flatlands. We then travelled around to the south of the mountain range and stopped in a forest near a village. There, a layperson came to tell me a number of strange stories that really took my fancy. This is the gist of what he had to say. About 3 kilometers from the village were 3 mountains covered with streams and open forests. The strange thing about the mountains was that if anyone went to cut any of the trees, he would either die a violent death, become seriously ill, or suffer misfortune of one sort or another. Sometimes on the lunar Sabbath, in the middle of the night, a bright light would come shooting out of the summit of the 3rd mountain. It seemed that a number of times monks had gone to spend the rains retreat on top of the 3rd mountain, but had had to leave in the middle of the retreat because of either strong winds, rains, or lightning strikes. This being the case, he wanted me to climb to the top of the mountain to see what was there. So the next morning, we set out for the 3rd mountain. After climbing to the top, I looked over the area and found it to be a pleasant and inviting place to stay. The people in my following, though, were afraid and began crying that they didn't want to stay, so in the end we had to climb back down. On the way back, we passed through a village and then went on to spend the night in a quiet forest nearby. The next morning, when we went for alms in the village, an old woman carrying a bowl of rice came running after us, calling and waving her arms. We stopped and waited as she caught up with us, kneeled down, and placed food in our bowls. After receiving her alms, we headed back to where we were staying, and she followed behind us. When she reached our campsite, she told us, "Last night, just before dawn, I dreamed that someone came and told me to get up and fix some food. A Dhutanga monk was going to come by on his alms round." So she had gotten up and fixed food just as she had dreamed, and sure enough, met us as we were going for alms, which is why she had been so excited. That evening, the villagers had spread word among themselves to come listen to a sermon, and as darkness fell, a lot of them came. By this time, I had been wandering around Cambodia for more than a month, to the point where I was able to preach the Dhamma in Cambodian well enough that we could understand one another fairly well. A few days later, I learned from one of the lay people there that a Cambodian monk who had studied the Tripitaka and was expert in translating Pali wanted to come and quiz me on the Dhamma. "That's okay," I told him. "Let him come." And so the next afternoon, he actually came. We discussed and debated the Dhamma until we were able to reach a good understanding of each other's practices and ways of conduct. The whole affair went by smoothly and peacefully, without incident. I spent quite a few days in the area, to the point where I began to feel quite close to many of the lay people there. I then said farewell and started back to Sisophon. Quite a number of lay people, both men and women, followed after us, forming an escort that fell away by stages. Reaching Sisophon, we stayed for 2 nights, and then went to visit a cave in a nearby mountain, a fine, secluded place. A Chinese monk was living there alone, so we sat and discussed the Dhamma. We hit it off so well that he invited me to stay and spend the rains retreat there. None of my following, though, wanted to stay on. From there, we walked to the border at Aranyaprathet, where we crossed back into Thailand. After staying a fair while in Aranyaprathet, we headed deep into the forest, skirting the mountain ranges, intending to cross into Nakhon Ratchasima province via the Phra Pass. By this point, it was nearing time to stop for the rains retreat. There was rain all along the way, leeches were everywhere, and travelling was by no means easy. We decided to come out around Phangorb Mountain and on along through Wanghok, Lance Palace, pass until we reached Ban Takhro, Prachantakam district, there in Prajimbury province. The trail along Wanghok Pass, if we had kept on going, would have led us through another jungle, and then across the border into Nakhon Ratchasima province at the branch district of Sakai Lang. But we decided not to travel on, because the rains were getting very heavy, and so spent the rains retreat there in Ban Takhro. This was the year 1934. Ban Takhro is set near the foot of a mountain by a large, deep stream that flows down into the district seat at Prachantakam. We spent the rains at the foot of the mountain. One member of my following, Bhikkhu-son, wasn't willing to stay there, and so headed through Prajimbury and spent the rains at Kalk Mountain in Nakhon Nayok province. This left just 2 of us to spend the rains together, along with the 2 young boys, in an old sala at the edge of the stream, In the course of the rains, there were 7 flash floods, sometimes with the water so high that we had to climb up and sleep in the rafters. We seemed to suffer a lot of hardships that year. The village was thick with poison and crawling with bandits and thieves. The people there made a steady practice of stealing water buffaloes and cows to kill for meat. I tried to teach them to abandon their evil ways and to do nothing but good, and eventually, some of them actually gave up making poison and stopped killing large animals such as water buffaloes and cows. Word of this spread until it reached the ears of the ecclesiastical head of Prajimbury province at Wat Makok. At the end of the rains, he came up looking for me and had me return with him to the town of Prajimbury. He was in need of meditation monks, he said, so I went along. He introduced me to the chief of police, as well as to the provincial governor, Luang Sin Songkram. I overheard the governor say to the ecclesiastical head, "Ask him to stay here in the province to help teach the people and stamp out banditry in the outlying districts." Hearing this, I said to myself, "You'd better get out of this province before they put you on a leash." So, I took my leave of the ecclesiastical head of Prajimbury province and took my group to stay in Grandfather Ken Cave in Ito Mountain. From there, we headed to the branch district of Srakayo, Crystal Pool, in Kabinbury district, where we went deep into the forest. We went to look over a cave in Big Lion Mountain, but I didn't care for what I saw because the air in the cave was dark and stale, so we retraced our steps back down the mountain. That day, we took a shortcut through the forest, heading for a certain village, but got lost because we were traveling in the middle of the night. We kept walking until about 4 a.m., cutting through virgin forest so as to reach the village, but ended up back practically where we had started, near Srakayo. The next morning, after our meal, we went into the forest, heading for Shakan, Young Savage Mountain, which was about 15 kilometers from Srakayo. Reaching the village at the foot of the mountain, we went to stay in Shakan Cave. The cave was a quiet, secluded spot, free from human disturbances, because the mountain abounded on all sides with fierce animals: tigers, elephants, and bears. Deep in the quiet of the night, sitting in meditation, you could hear the calls of the elephants as they went about, breaking off tree branches with their trunks. There was a village about 1 kilometer from the mountain. We stayed there in the cave a good many days. From there we cut through a giant forest, a stretch of 70 kilometers with no human habitation. It took 2 days to get through, and we had to spend 2 nights sleeping out in the middle of the wilds, because there weren't any villages. We kept on going until we crossed the border into Chanthaburi province, passing through Ban Ta Riang, Ban Ta Moon, and on into Makam, Tamarind district. From there, we skirted around the forest behind Srabab, Sinpond Mountain, and reached Klung district. In Klung, I learned that Kun Amnad Amnwekit had left government service and was now living in retirement in Chantaburi. This I was glad to hear. I passed through the city of Chantaburi and went to stay in an open field to the south of town, by the canal to Ban Pradu, before going to visit Kun Amnad at his home. He found me a quiet place to stay, a burial ground about 800 meters from town. This was an area of bamboo and taiu trees, thickly overgrown with grass, with only one clearing large enough to stay in, the clearing where they held cremations. The place was called Klaung Kung, Shrimp Canal Cemetery. This was how I came to stay there. By this point, there was only one other monk staying with me, an old monk who had followed me from Prajinbury, and one boy. The others had left to return home. As the rains neared, a number of Chanthaburi people asked me to stay and spend the retreat there. So I went to inform the ecclesiastical head of the province, but he wouldn't allow it. So I had Kun Amnad go in person to inform the ecclesiastical head of the southeast region, Phra Rajakavi, at Wat Debsirin in Bangkok. Phra Rajakavi sent a letter to the provincial head, having him give me permission to spend the rains there in the cemetery. I first came to stay here in Klaung Kung Cemetery on March 5, 1935. That first rainy season, the practice of the Dhamma began to catch on among a number of different people in the city of Chanthaburi. A monk and a novice came to spend the rains with me. At the end of the rains, we went off, wandering from place to place in the province, and even more people became interested in practicing the Dhamma. At the same time, though, a number of people, both monks and lay people, became jealous and resentful and started a full-scale campaign against me. Posters began appearing on the signboards in the middle of town, making charges against me that became more and more serious as time went on. One day, an old woman, claiming to be a follower of mine, went through town taking up a collection, asking for money and rice, claiming that she had accompanied me on my wanderings. She canvassed the town until she came to the house of Prince Anuwat Warafong. The prince called her into his house to question her, and afterwards started spreading invidious remarks about me, even though I was completely ignorant of what was going on. He talked to people on the street, in stores and in their homes, saying that I was a no-good vagrant monk, letting my followers wander about pestering people, taking up collections. This suddenly became a big issue all over town. I had no idea what had started the issue. It so happened that Kun Nai Kimlang, the wife of Kun Amnad and Nang Fiang, both of whom knew well what sort of person I was, learned of the rumours and went straight to the home of Prince Anuwat, where they also found the provincial governor. They began to take issue with the prince, saying, "You've been going around making vicious, unfounded charges against our Ajahn, and from now on we want you to stop." This started a big scene right there in front of the provincial governor. Finally, after making an investigation, they discovered that the old woman was connected with the monks at Wat Mai and was no follower of mine, and that I had never had any women accompany me on my wanderings. That was the end of the matter. During my second reigns in Chanthaburi, there was another affair. This time, a number of laypeople went to the Supreme Patriarch at Wat Bovonives in Bangkok and charged me with being a fraud. The Supreme Patriarch sent a letter to the provincial head, Phra Gurunatha of Wat Chanthanaram, telling him to look into the matter. So I immediately copied down the information in my monastic identification papers and sent it to the Supreme Patriarch, who then told us to wait where we were, that he would come and see for himself after the end of the rains retreat. And when the rains were over, he came to Chanthaburi. When I learned that the boat he was travelling on had docked at Thar Chaleb, I had a contingent of laypeople go to greet him. He spent the night at Wat Chanthanaram, and the next morning, after breakfast, came to see me at what was now Klong Kung Forest Monastery. I invited him to deliver a sermon to the laypeople present, but he declined the invitation, saying, "I'm afraid I've never practiced meditation. How could I deliver a meditation sermon?" He then went on to say, "I've learned that a great number of people here hold you in very high esteem. Monks like you are hard to find." With that, he returned to Wat Chanthanaram and then to Bangkok. During my third rainy season there, the people in Chanthaburi came out in even greater numbers to hear my sermons, to the point where Nai Saung Kui, the owner of the bus lines, felt moved to announce that he would give a discount to anyone who took his bus to hear the sermons of this Ajahn, meaning me. As for myself and the other monks and novices in the monastery, we could take his buses anywhere in town free of charge. Day by day, more and more people, including the provincial governor and district officials in every district, came to know me. When the rains were over, I went out to wander through the various townships in every district of Chanthaburi province, teaching and delivering sermons to the people. When I returned to the provincial capital, I would go almost every Sunday to deliver sermons in the provincial prison. At that time, Phra Nikonbodi was provincial governor and Kun Bhumiprasad, the district official in Tha Mai, Newport. Both of them seemed especially eager to help me get about. Sometimes they would ask me to give sermons to prisoners, either in the monastery or in the district offices. On other occasions, they would ask me to give sermons to the people in the different townships in Tha Mai district, especially in Na Yai Arm, Grandmother Arm's Field, a densely forested area crawling with bandits and thieves. I made a constant effort to keep on teaching the people in this way. The provincial capital continued to be thick with incidents and rumours concocted by people hot-eyed with jealousy, but none of this ever fazed me in the least. Sometimes Kun Nai Kimlang, a supporter I respected as if she were my mother, would come to me and say, "They're going to make things hard for you in all kinds of ways. They'll either be sending women here, or else gangsters, looking for an opening to smear your name. Are you up to the fight? If not, you'd better go live someplace else." So I'd answer, "Bring on 2 more Chanthaburis. I'm not going to run away, but I can tell you that as soon as there are no more incidents, I probably will want to run away." I kept up my efforts to do good. Some villages in the province wanted meditation monks to come live on a steady basis, and in particular, Kun Bhumiprasad wanted monks to go live at Na Yai Am. I didn't have any monks to spare, but I promised to find some for him. I sent a letter to Ajahn Singh asking for monks, and he sent down a group of 5, who then went to set up a monastery in Nayayam. This was a really poor village. They were hard-pressed to find even a shovel to dig post holes for the monks' quarters. After I had sent the monks to live there, I got together a contingent of laypeople, headed by Kun Nai Hong, wife of Luang Anuthai, and Kun Nai Kimlang, to go visit them. When we reached the monks' residence in Nayayam and saw the destitute conditions under which the villagers and monks were living, Kun Nai Kimlang lost her temper. "Here we've brought monks out here to suffer and starve. Don't stay here," she told the monks. "Come back with us to Chanthaburi." When Ajahn Kongma, the leader of the monks, heard this, he lost nerve and actually decided to return to Chanthaburi. As a result, the monastery fell vacant, with no monks staying on for the rains. After that, Ajahn Kongma went to start a monastery in Ban Naung Bua, Lotus Marsh village, and trained the lay people there, and in this way helped to spread the Dhamma in Chanthaburi province.